Thank you for coming here today to watch Tyler. And here's Tyler.
Thank you. Today we're talking about NixOS. It's a Linux operating system that is kind of awesome, and I fell down a rabbit hole around the time they were accepting talks, so I decided to make one. Few disclaimers before I start. I wrote these slides, like half of them, on the flight here. I have not run through the demo fully, and don't present often, so please bear with me if I absolutely flub things. All right. So we're going to go over basically what Nix is. We're going to talk a little bit about how the language works. We're going to get hands-on, do a quick setup of just like a base fresh install. Flakes, Home Manager as ways to manage things, and then we're going to show how we can move it to an entirely different system. So why use Nix? It's time for the buzzwords. It is a declarative. You say, here's the state I want my machine to be in, and it makes it happen. It has an isolated store, so you can have different versions. If you've ever tried to work with Python, you know what I'm talking about. You can have whatever version you want. They can live next to each other, and they're perfectly happy. It's reproducible. Everything is tracked exactly what it is. If I give you my config, you can go run it, and you will end up with the exact same setup that I have. And it has atomic upgrades. If some part of your upgrade fails, something goes wrong, you're never going to end up in a bad state. And if you do, you just roll back to the previous state, and it's just moving a pointer around. That's all it is. So everyone loves to talk about this. I've never had an issue with any other repo or distro either, but that is way too small for you to see, isn't it? The gist of it is that dot in the very far top right is Nix package library. It has by far the most number of unique packages and the most up-to-date packages. So of the average age of them, they're all updated constantly. That's the thing people care about. I've never had an issue, but I figured I'd include it because everyone else does. Oh, and then last comment at the end. If something is missing, it's not hard to make it yourself. You can add it. You can add whatever you want in. That's a little out of scope for this, but highly recommend reading about it. All right, so Nix is bad at naming things. There's a bunch of things all called Nix, and it's incredibly confusing when you're trying to read and learn about it. There's the Nix packages, which is the repository. Think app, think yum, think AUR, Flatpak, whatever it is. That is the actual servers that are hosting basically just caching all of the built packages. There's the Nix language itself, which is what everything is defined in. There's NixOS, which is an operating system that is built entirely out of packages from Nix. And then there's Home Manager, which doesn't include Nix in the name, so it's not that confusing. But it does manage all of your home files, all of your dot files, in a very Nix way. And we're going to play with every part of this. All right, so for sake of not making you guys watch a loading bar go, I already installed Nix, but if we were going to do that part live, it's basically the same as anything else. You download the ISO, there's minimal, there's graphical, either GNOME or KDE. When you go to download it, it does not lock you into whatever desktop environment that you download. That is just the one that the installer loads in. And then from there, you can, again, I made it way too small, that might be a theme. There's a list of desktops to choose from. That's part of the installer. So when you choose it from the website, that is just the installer. You're not locked into it. It doesn't matter what you choose. Take that ISO, shove it into whatever you want to use, physical machine, VM, and then just start it up and follow the instructions. There's a gotcha if anyone uses VMware. You have to make sure that VMware is taking the size of the display that the VM wants. Because the KDE's got a weird desktop resize bug thing. I don't know. It's KDE's issue. It's not Nix's issue. And then you just start it. Same as everything. I'm sure everyone's done it before. So the language itself is weird. It looks like JSON. It's not. The main kind of building block of it is attribute sets. This you can kind of think of like JSON, except for it uses equals and everything's got a semicolon at the end of it. So this is saying I have my attribute foo, setting it to hello, right down the list. One thing I wanted to call out here is, here you see lib doesn't have quotes around it. Paths are first-class citizens in Nix. Anytime you have a path, that is going to be put into the Nix store, which we're going to get to. Just take it for what it is for now. And that can be converted to a string, which points to the actual one in Nix store, or you can do other things with it. Functions. Functions are defined by having your argument and then your expression, expression. Nix functions can only take in one argument at a time. I think it's similar to Haskell. I haven't touched Haskell in forever, but I think it's the same deal. So you have to use currying if you want to have multiple inputs, or what most people do, just throw an attribute set in there. Although it's not an attribute set, I misspoke. It is an argument set, and they are slightly different in Nix. Yeah, it's great. Yes, and then also we have the optional argument. So if you don't want to make it optional, if you want to pass something in or not, you can have a default. So that bottom is taking in an attribute set with a key of arg and a default value for arg being bar. And then the one in the middle that I skipped over, that arg is a attribute set being passed in, and I got myself out of order. I told you I don't present often. What's defined at the bottom example is what the argument set looks like, right? That's why it's got a little bit different syntax than the attribute set, but you can pass an attribute set in. A little bit more about functions, right? So the example of currying is the top in the rightmost cell for more functions. You can see that as a function A, which returns another function B, and B takes A and B, both basic currying, right? And then you have the ellipse to take any number of arguments. The argument set that is being expected has to exactly match the keys of the attribute set being passed in. So the ellipse is your way of saying, I don't care about the rest of them. I only want to take out foo from this. And then both of these have @args on either side, because Nix likes to be confusing sometimes. And what that does is basically says, I'm going to destructure these ones, but I can access the whole set by doing args.whatever. So in the middle one, I kind of show that a little bit. All right. Recursive attribute sets. And we're going to still go through the language is probably the biggest part to get your head around. Once you play with it, it makes a lot more sense. But I'm just kind of throwing the information at you now, and we're going to use it. So recursive attribute sets lets you reference yourself further up. So this kind of bridges more into this kind of procedural languages where you define a thing and then you can reference it. It lets you do that a little bit. So here we have a key called user, and then in home we reference the username so we don't have to repeat ourselves. Let in is similar but distinct in that it doesn't create a key, right? So I have let foo equals 42. That's not a key in my attribute set, but I get to use that value wherever I want in the attribute set. And then lists don't use commas, they use space delimited, which can be a little weird to read. And I tried to have a example in the let in. So you see foo1. That's also the same way you call a function, but because foo is not a function, doesn't apply. It can be confusing to read, so watch out for it. But yeah. So and then in the list we have an example of the built-in function element at being called. So I give it a list, element at 1, right? Basic function call in Nix. All right. So let me switch to here. Don't look at that. That's for me. And now we're going to get hands-on a little bit. So we're going to start here in my VM. So all I did was install, run the installer, reboot it, and then open up the terminal. So this is what you're going to basically start fresh slate. So we're going to go ahead and try and edit sudo. Other disclaimer, I meant to say earlier, I normally type on an ortholinear keyboard with like custom bindings, and this is killing me. I swear I'm better at typing than this. But you're going to have to bear with me for it. Thank you. All right. So this is where your configuration lives, right? By default, this is what you end up with.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Maybe. That's not right. There you go. Control plus. Okay, so I'm actually glad I did that because it's one of the first things we're about to go fix. Vim doesn't exist out of the box. The only thing we have is nano. Exactly. Nano. Boo! No. All right. So we're going to apply some of what we learned on the language slide that I'm sure everyone remembers. Every, I shouldn't say every. This particular configuration is a Nix module, which is just a function. It's just a function that gets passed in a specific set of arguments and returns back a thing. And that thing can or maybe doesn't have a specific set of things. It depends on what's calling it. We'll get to that in a second. So this is taking in config and packages, which are two of the things that, because it's a module, when it gets called, it'll be passed those and a bunch of other stuff. And all it's doing is, it's first thing, importing our hardware configuration. So hardware config is another file that's auto-generated for us that when you're using Nix, you're not going to touch. It's auto-generated and just tells NixOS what hardware you have when you install it so that it can grab the right stuff for you. You're never going to have to touch that. We're not even going to look at it. It just exists. There's a bunch of other stuff that we're not going to go too much into other than just noting that each of these is an attribute being set on this attribute. Interesting phrasing. An attribute being set on this attribute set that is going to be returned from here. So I didn't cover this in the language, but this dot notation is just shorthand for a nested attribute sets, right? So that's bootloader is an attribute set that has loader as one of the keys, that has systemd boot as one of the keys, that has enable as one of the keys, that is set to true. That wasn't me. Okay, we're good. Turn off sticky keys. We're going to skip over most of this to get down to the things we care about, which is how do I install Vim? Because I don't want to use Nano anymore. So that's actually templated out for us a little bit in this default file. I highly encourage, go play with it, read over all this. It's good to kind of get your head around. There's a great way to look up what this stuff does that we're going to go over at the end. But we're going to ignore it for now and go right down to environment.systempackages. When I say take my config, make it reality, this is one of the kind of keys that is baked in that it looks at. So it's going to look at environment system packages to say what packages do I want to install. Right now it's an empty list. We're going to fix that. We're going to uncomment Vim, and we're going to uncomment wget just because it's here. We don't really need it. And we're going to do one last thing so I can get out of here and use SSH where I have a terminal that I actually set up properly, which is enable SSHD. This is the sort of like thing that makes NixOS fantastic. And all of the configs here, right? Just by setting this to enable, I'm saying, hey, Nix, take care of configuring this with currently whatever its defaults are, and just have it run. Make sure the daemon starts, make sure it's configured with sensible defaults, and go. So we are going to figure out how to use nano x, save yes, name is the same. And then I reference my notes to make sure I'm not forgetting something. All right, so now we're going to actually say, hey, make those changes reality. So that is sudo nix, not sudo again, NixOS rebuild switch. It's going to rebuild the system and switch to it. And hopefully this is clear. I did confirm on the way when I was practicing this, internet here is slower than on my flight here. So do with that what you want. We're going to skip a bit of the later demo because of that. But sorry, I'm closer to the satellites, I guess. I don't know.
Let's say, what airline did you fly?
United. Good times.
Okay.
All right, so that's done. Now, if all went according to plan, we can do Vim, not sim, Vim. Thank you. And now Vim exists, and now I'm not miserable anymore.
Oh, thank God.
Cheers for Vim. So, where did Vim go? How was it here? What happened, right? So let's look at which Vim to see where it's actually stored at. Run current system S software bin is not normal, right? That's a new thing. Let's make it even weirder. So let's do LSLA for, let's go see exactly what's there. Now it's weirder. That's a symlink to a very weird file path. This is the Nix story. This is what makes it so that you can have multiple versions of Python installed. It doesn't care. You can have multiple everything, and it's not going to collide. This is who's familiar with how Git stores files? Right? Merkle tree. You have hash of a file, hash of another file to make a folder, right? You say, I have this folder that with its own hash that references the other two hash. That's what this is doing, just with linked lists instead of a bunch of files like Git does.
What kind
Or
of
not
tree
linked
did you
lists,
call that?
sim lists. Sorry?
What kind of tree did you call that?
Merkle tree?
Merkle?
Yeah, so you have the hashes, and the hashes kind of build up into folders. The only other, I've given one other talk, which was on how Git works, which is why I'm overly familiar with that. So yeah, this is pointing at the exact version that we have downloaded here in the content addressable file system. So you have that hash, that is the hash of everything that's in that folder, and then you have just a nice name and version after that, so it's easier to know what you're looking at. All right, so now we're going to look at the way generations work. We talked about rollbacks earlier. It provides easy rollbacks. So let's see where we're at. We're going to run sudo nixenv list generations. You can ignore most of this command because you're probably not going to care too much about it. But what it does is it lists out the generations that exist. So the generation 1 was the first, fresh install that we got. When we did NixOS rebuild switch, what it did, it made that second generation. Once everything completed successfully, boom, updated the pointer, and now we're on the new version. What we can do to easily, say we mess something up, we're like, I made this thing unusable for myself. We can do sudo NixOS rebuild switch rollback. Right. And now if we look at our generations, we see current's back on 1 again. That was all it took. And now, unfortunately,
There goes our Vim.
unfortunately my Vim is gone. So we're going to undo that real quick.
Can you add comments to those generations?
That is a great question. I have no idea. Not that I've ever done, because it's really, we're going to get more into this later, but you put everything into kind of a Git repo, and then I have everything source controlled out of there. So if I want to go back, I don't do a generation back. I just check out the previous version, rebuild to that.
Gotcha.
So let's do without the rollback and rebuild this again. So this is the same command to rebuild everything. And what we're going to see, there it is that for list generations, I'm glad they're both still on screen, it's the same thing. It's even down to the same timestamp, right? It's a different time now that we just rebuilt it. Because the hashes are the same, because we didn't change the config, it actually didn't build anything. It didn't download anything new. It did nothing different other than just move the pointer back to it. And that's not because we told it to move the pointer there. We told it to build the whole system. If we had changed the config, it'd be on a different thing now. But that's part of the, because it's a content addressable file system, right? You don't have no duplication, right? If you download a file, it's there. It's always going to be that. All right, and then one other way you can kind of roll out your own. So let's say you really screwed things up.
Like you installed Emacs?
Okay. I'm not here to start fights, okay? I'm okay hating on Nano, but you don't mess with Emacs users. This is the grub screen. You have the choice of, and as we have more versions, right, every time you rebuild, this will grow. There is garbage collection. I can see people already worrying about that. So like, for example, on my system, it deletes anything older than 7 days. So yeah, you can, let's say we really screwed up 2, you can click on 1 and go back to it. We're not going to do that though, because I want to continue where we left off.
Can you set the garbage collection to use generations instead of time?
I think so.
Okay.
All right. And there's my wonderful notes I've been looking at on my screen. All right. So now we're getting into flakes, and this is going to get more into the source control I was talking about before. Flakes solve kind of the few problems that exist with Nix as default, right? Nix configuration assumes that you own everything, right? You're not going to reference other things. If you want to declare it's there. Flake solves that by letting you reference, say, I want to pull in this other flake that someone else wrote, and I'm going to use that for me, and I'm going to modify it and do whatever I want with it. Right? So you can compose. You can have every one of your programs be a separate flake if you want, in the way you have it configured, and pull in and mess with those as you want. Reproducibility. There's no lock file if you're npm, right? Lock files. I'm sure other languages do as well. That's the first one that comes to mind. Lets you make sure it's the same thing. This is the way I said earlier. If I give you my config, you can run it. This is the way you do that. Otherwise, it has a reference to essentially the current state of the package servers that I'm pulling from. And if they update over there, I'd get the newer version. This locks the version for everything that you have and all the dependencies of everything. So it's all the way down. And traceability. Same reasons before. Now I have, and I'm like, oh, what version of whatever do I have? I don't know where this came from. I can go look at the log file and know exactly where it's from. Just some handy things that should be there by default, but they're not. So you got to enable this experimental feature. So now we're going to jump back to, don't look at my notes, don't look at my notes. We're actually going to do this from here so I can make the font better for everyone. Is that easier to read? That's not. Okay. So we are going to. So flakes are not part of the main NixOS. I think it's one of probably the main blockers for it becoming more mainstream than it is. You have to enable the experimental feature. So the first thing we're going to do is vim somewhere in here. Our configuration. And we're going to add a line to allow us to use the experimental feature. So nix.settings. All right. So we're setting that nested attribute set. The features that we want to allow for experimental features are those two things, those two strings in the list, and those are what we're enabling. So we're going to run that. So this is going to make generation 3 now that has flakes enabled when it finishes. All right. So now we're going to take everything we have right now from the config, and we're going to move it into a flake. So we're going to make a new directory, cd into it, and we are going to do nix flake init from a template that is in templates trivial. So templates is a thing built into Nix. There's a bunch of different templates for whatever you want to do. We're just going to use the very basic one. It's going to go pull it and give us our flake.nix. So what does it give us by default? We get this, right? So what is this? Flakes have very specific inputs, outputs, and a couple other keys we're not going to worry too much about. The big things are inputs is where it goes and finds the other packages we reference, right? This is the composability part. So this is saying I want to go grab all the packages from NixOS unstable, which is basically the main branch. And there's a billion different ways you can write that. Like you can give it an HTTPS URL, you can give it Git. There's a couple different formats. This is just saying Nix packages, the NixOS unstable branch. Follow that. And then it has outputs, and the outputs are what gets passed back up to the command you're running, right? The outputs of executing the script is a attribute set that describes everything you want on your system and the configuration for everything on your system. So right now this is saying, this is returning an attribute set with two installed packages, one hello, one default, both pulled from self.packages. And we're not going to get into that too much because self is weird. But we're deleting this anyways. And we're going to make our own thing here. So I'm pasting in this so you don't have to watch me type it all out. Oh, that pasted in funky. All right, so this is essentially wrapping around our config. So we're going to break this down a little bit. NixOS configurations.mynixOS. That's saying that's the key that is being defined here. in that, I am using the nixpackages.lib.nixOS system function and passing in my attribute set that has what system I am and whatever modules I want to include. So the module is going to be imported into there, merged together, and then that is going to be set on, passed through the NixOS system function, and that is set on my NixOS on Nix configurations. So the NixOS rebuild switch command is going to execute your Nix file, and it's looking specifically for NixOS configurations dot whatever your host name is right now, or whatever you tell it to if you want to do something not your host name, and then taking that, instantiating it. So we are going to take this and save it. Now, keen eyes, I don't actually have a configuration in the current directory right now. We're going to in a second by copying what we already have. That's wrong. And now I have stuff. And just to live life on the edge. Hold on.
Bang, bang.
Boom.
Yep,
There we go.
Sudo, bang,
Bang, bang, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so now that's gone, and all we have is our current flake. So let's use it. We have sudo nixOS rebuild switch, should look familiar. But this time we're going to give it the flake command, or flake flag. And we're going to say here. What did I do wrong? I copy pasted things wrong. This is why we do live demos.
Typo in the like too many.
Yep, there it is.
Yep.
That's much better. Okay. This takes, first of all, that would never work because the host name I have is not my NixOS, which is what the config name is. So to fix that, you say I'm going to give it hash, and then whatever you want to actually take the output of. So my NixOS. This is going to take forever to run because the internet is slow. So I'm going to take a brief pause to switch over to a different snapshot of this VM that has this done already. But what it ends up in is this exact same system we have, but now we're in flake land, right? The advantage, other than kind of what I had on the other slide, is that now you're out of Etsy, you're into a thing that you can take and you can mess with all you want because you have this nice handy wrapper around what your actual configuration is. So I'm going to find my mouse. And switch snapshots. All right, and we're going to come back to that in a second. This is the last kind of major piece of the puzzle, and it's all going to come together, is Home Manager. Where NixOS, where the rest of the, kind of the Nix system is about configuring your system itself on kind of the root level. Home Manager is all about your user files, all about your dot files, any programs installed in the user space, all that. So Home Manager is the exact same language you're used to, just for dot files. It lets you kind of reference things that you have in your system, right? So in my system, I have my user set up, right? I can reference that user as is, like as a variable from my Home Manager config without having to copy myself around. If I change my username, boom, one spot. We love programming. Yeah, it's got all the good stuff. All your shell preferences, settings, it generates dot files for you. So, now hopefully this is done. All right. I'm going to reboot because I started using Parallels because I needed macOS VM, and it's got a weird thing with restoring snapshots where it'll just kind of be weird until I reboot it. So that, and then I didn't need to log in because I'm going to come over here. Yeah, I thought that might happen. Not yet. Yeah. Sure. I feel like that should also work. All right. Now, because I had to restore the snapshot, we jumped ahead a little bit, and we already have these files here, so you don't have to suffer through me typing them out. So we're going to edit, well, we're not going to edit because it's already there. So what's different here is we added those references to home manager. So homemanager.url is a new key in our inputs, right? And that's saying we're going to go grab this other flake, that flake being home manager. We're going to pull it in, and we're going to be able to reference that now from home manager. We also, and this is a common pattern you'll see across flakes, is you can tell it what version of packages to follow. So this is saying, hey, I want to grab that, but I want to make sure I'm using the same Nix packages, like versions, that I'm already using for the rest of my system. So that's what that Nix packages follows is. What's new in the outputs is we now have a new argument being sent to it, which is home manager. We got to pass it in to be able to use it. And we can see in our modules, we are now calling this function from home manager. Home manager.nixOS is a function that takes in your home manager config and turns it into a module that can then be imported into your full NixOS config. Right? So it kind of pulls the whole thing together. There's another way to use home manager, which I don't recommend, for a standalone install, which kind of keeps the two worlds separate. And there's another way you can integrate it. We're not going to go over it because this is the way you should do it. Flakes are experimental, but they are where everything's going. They're going to be, I don't know, it's been experimental for 5 years. Eventually it's going to be real. So this is saying I want to take that in, and what I'm giving it is saying that I have a user. That username is LFNW, and the config for that user is here. We could have multiple of these lines for multiple users if we want. We don't, though, because there's only one of me. What did I change? There we go. So this is that home file. So this is very similar to the configuration you're looking at, but this is all about doing my dot files, right? So I have a user space package. I don't want to do btop, actually, because btop's got an issue with it I found earlier. We're going to do ndim. So this is going to install NeoVim in my user, and it's also going to enable bash to be managed by home manager. And it's going to set some stuff on it. There's a point that some people are probably confused by, where you have programs.whatever.enable, or you have, I want to add it to my system packages, whatever the rest of that was earlier. If the option to do like .enable is there, do that, because that not only says I want to have this package in my path, it says I want to have this package in my path, and Nix take care of doing defaults for me, or configure further through there as well, without having to necessarily go out and do your own custom stuff and to create a dot file. So this is setting this, and these are just some things so we can kind of verify that it's actually being used. When you generate this, and any tutorial will tell you how to generate the flake for this, you're going to get this state version. Don't ever change it. Don't worry about it. It just lives there. It needs to know it for backwards compatibility reasons. And then home manager enable saying, home manager, manage yourself, right? This kind of gets into the other one we're not going to talk about. You're going to have that. You're going to want that. So we are going to make this real now. So we're going to do NixOS rebuild switch again with my flake and my hash so it knows which one to build. And because I did this already, actually I didn't. I just changed it to nvim instead of btop. So it actually is going to do something. Hopefully it installs quickly, so we're not waiting too long.
So if you didn't pass flake in here, like what would happen? Would it just ignore that whole config, or?
It would try and read from etc NixOS, which doesn't exist because I armed it.
Cool.
So you get an error about not being able to find the configuration.
Gotcha.
Permission denied. Ah, thank you. I heard it from over there too. I like my muscle memory is doing the up arrow. Control A, yes, exactly. So now, we have NeoVim, way better than Vim. Awesome. So this is all here, and if I were to exit and go back into it, so that I refresh my shell, right? I can now, did I call it foo? Yay, foo echoes the value of that in vvar that we had set, and that's all exists now. I didn't have this in my notes, but let's do it real quick. Let's look at our home directory to see that file. I know what I'm trying to type. Keys are not in the same spot I expect them to be. It's driving me crazy. So we see the same weird symlink stuff we did before. That's because when we make it, generate it, fully makes that file, throws in the store, and then everything is just a reference to the store. You're going to see these symlinks everywhere. So yeah, and that's that. And you can follow that. Sometimes you'll see like multiple symlinks if you're going down like a folder structure. But yeah, we're going to leave that there for now. Last kind of bit is to modularize your config, right? So right now we just kind of have these one file for home, one file for the system, and it's not maintainable. NixOS has a whole, in addition to flakes, right? So flakes are kind of this higher level thing. There's a whole module system under that. So your code in your repo, you're going to have split up into modules. We're not going to go too in depth, but like for the one I use, I have a module for NeoVim. I have a module for Tmux, and each of those contains all of the configs and options I define for those. So this is kind of what you saw the imports, or you saw modules equals, right? In the context of the module itself, you'll see imports, like we had for the hardware config file, right? So that's going to go through and import all of them. You can also manually import like a specific file, just using the import command. And that just brings all of the key values that are set inside of the object returned, sets those in the space that you're currently in, that you're importing to. Attribute set merging is a thing that comes up at this point, because now you have different files that might define the same keys. What happens when they clash? And that depends entirely on the type of variable and the priority you have set for it. So that's the point kind of 2 and 3 here. I made these way too small, didn't I? I'm sorry if you're not able to read those. So merging depends on what it is. If it's a Boolean or a single string, it conflicts, because it's not going to know what to do with those, unless you have priorities set. So you can say make override or make order, right? So make override is setting that priority. So whatever has the lowest number is the higher priority. So it'll take kind of whichever of those. If they're the same, it'll complain at you and say, I can't do that. You asked me to do 2 things at once. Then you have things lists and multi-line strings, which have different behavior. And there's a bunch of different types as well. There's reference documentation for that. But lists, if you define it twice, whatever one it hits second will be appended to the end of that. Multi-line strings, same deal. Whatever hits second will get a new line and be slapped at the end. Unless you have make order, which is down point, kind of the same deal as make override, where you can say, I want this one to be higher up, a lower number higher up on the list. And it will put all of the different entries you have in the order that their make order is in. And now back to the demo. So we're now going to take this. Okay. We're going to take this and we're going to split out that bash config we did. So we're going to edit. There we go, that's what I wanted. We're going to grab this, and we're going to shove it into a new location. We're going to call it bash.nix. And because it's a module, we need to make it a function, right? We can't just have the thing. So we're going to wrap this in something we don't care about the arguments for. And we're going to return this as a attribute set. So that we have that there. Now we need to go back to reference it here. So now, from our home, we need to import that, right? So because we're in a module, we're going to use the imports syntax for it, which is one of the special keys that is automatically looked at when the module system is kind of building everything out. So we're going to add imports equals -nix. So this, the special key, and it's also worth kind of double tapping that the .bash.nix is not in quotes. It is a special thing because that file is copied into the Nix store in evaluating, and that when it actually evaluates is that weird your Nix store random hash, right? Not random, but you know what I mean. So we add that, and then I make sure I don't forget anything. We should be able to rebuild and see nothing change, which I realize now is not the most exciting thing in the world. Also, highly recommend aliasing that to something, which I do normally, but on the demo I did not alias it. And now you'll see that nothing is different. Yay, same. And to show it's the same, I'm going to do foo again, and it still gives the same output, which is a cutoff 1 because the cropping is weirdly cropped. So that is all of the kind of building blocks and pieces you need to kind of go off into your own. We're going to go a step further, which is to take this bash configuration we have and actually use that on something else. So this is kind of one of my favorite things with it. I got started just kind of playing with NixOS, and then I used my Mac for work. So I wanted to kind of bring my full NeoVim config with me, which is a lot of code written out. So through Nix, I can just install Nix Darwin on my Mac and then say I want to take that same thing and have a new target in that flake file. So you can kind of think of each entry where we had like NixOS configuration .hostname. That's kind of like a target that you can build to. That's what that hash we're putting at the end of the command. I got ahead of myself. I was supposed to wait till this slide to say all that. Then I said that just now. And then we're back to. So now we get to switch to here. All right, so this is a mostly fresh VM, which that's a lie because it took far too long to install NixOS, so I shortcutted this again a little bit and just we're already at the end goal we're going to be at with this VM, but we're going to walk through how we got there. So if anyway, this VM exists. This is what I'm about to SSH into, so I can have this larger font. So you see here, all of the files are copied over with the addition of a new darwin.nix. So this darwin.nix is what's going to have our Nix Darwin configuration, basically our Mac configuration. So we're going to look at actually flakes first, because there's a change there as well, which is we have our new target. So first of all, we have our Nix Darwin's another flake, another external dependency we're bringing in that we're going to reference. So we have that here, and same pattern as before, we tell it to track our Nix packages, so we get all the same, nothing tries to disagree on what version it's using. And then we have our second target down here. So this is our other target, right? It's a Darwin configuration. So the same way we had the NixOS rebuild switch looked for Nix configurations, the Darwin rebuild switch, which is the command we're going to use, looks for Darwin configurations. And then same kind of pattern as before. My Mac OS would be the host name, which is not the host name, so we're going to use the hash again to tell it where to go. And then exact same pattern. I'm not going to go too much more into that. I'm going to go into that file, and so this is our Darwin config. Has, again, NeoVim, because I'm not creative, and it's the only thing I can think of. And it's got some the flags to allow us to use flakes. Right, so this is kind of this equivalent of configuration.nix we had for NixOS. This is the same thing here. And then this state version works the same way it did you saw in Home Manager, and you also might have seen in configuration.nix. It works the same way. And platform to tell it what we're on. So this is the part where I would normally do Darwin rebuild, and you're going to see nothing change because I ran this already because it took too long the first time. Or I type out something. Nix is notoriously bad for its errors. It gives worse error messages I've ever seen in my life. Does anyone want to guess if you can read it, does anyone want to guess at what that is? Or what the actual issue is here? Path is close, but again, that's why it's incredibly, it tells you the wrong thing. What I'm missing?
It's not a flake. Is that?
That honestly is part of it. I messed up my notes.
And no suit?
I know CD.
Closer.
Let's try that
You
again.
have to do the flag as well, or the target.
Yes, exactly. It does not make that clear from the output it gives you, especially because I had the wrong error that I was expecting to get. But yes, we need that. And this is not NixOS, this is my macOS. And it's the same thing now, right? Exact same way it behaved before, it's just now here. And you can, through Nix Darwin, you can install all of your homebrew packages if you want to use that. If there's something that's only available there, you can control that through here and tell it to take control over it. So anything that's not listed, if you delete it out of your config, it'll delete it from there and it'll manage that state for you. Most things I recommend trying to do through Nix packages if available. Yes?
If you're, once you've imported that, have they diverged, and if you make changes over here, they're not going to replicate and vice versa, or?
Are you talking across like NixOS versus NixOS now?
No, any of these flake configurations where you're importing your standard, I love this version of Vim, boom, there it is. You've now made a change to that, or maybe the other side. Are those now separate changes that do not sync up, or if you were to import that same I love my Vim flake again, would it have the newest changes, or is it like a static, this is my reference copy?
Got you. Gregory, so you're saying like, can I have two flakes kind of built to the same machine?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I thought of that potential issue yesterday and wasn't able to test it, which is why we're doing this in a VM and not directly on my MacBook right now. To answer the question, I don't think there's anything stopping you, and I think the second one you do will clobber anything that conflicts in the first one. I don't know for sure, which is why we're not doing that right now. Other disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I just fell down a rabbit hole like 6 months ago, and now we're here because I like it a lot and I wanted to evangelize it because I think it's an awesome system. This is the end of what I had planned. Yeah, that's it.